Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. Welcome back to By Design. In the last episode, I spoke about the value equation, how we as designers, how we as creatives, how we as strategists can leverage the value equation to deliver more value. And it all starts with understanding the client and understanding their dream outcome. I spoke in the last episode about how I have an extensive interview list to go through with a prospect ahead of kicking off a project to really understand their dream outcomes. That when it comes to a project proposal, I can really position myself in the best way and show that I am the person to help them deliver on their dream outcome and ideally help me gain more clients, more high quality clients, and also deliver more value to these clients. So more happier clients is the name of the game. So the issue is that most designers, most creatives, we think or we can think that we're in the business of selling the deliverables. A lot of the time, I found myself saying this in the past where it's like, okay, well, what's the final deliverable? So I can just focus in on that. So it could be logos, websites, brand guidelines, AVs, whatever it is. But if you want to charge premium rates, we need to understand, we need to realize that we aren't selling pixels, in the case of digital designers, we're selling a transformation. So just to recap, to understand how to charge more, we need to define what value actually is. And I got this from Alex Hormozi in his book, $100 million Offers. Hormozi defines value using this equation. So he says that value is dream outcome multiplied by perceived likelihood of achievement from the prospect, all divided by time delay multiplied by effort and sacrifice. So the more we can reduce time delay and the more we can reduce effort and sacrifice for the prospect, and the more we can increase the dream outcome and the perceived likelihood of achieving that dream outcome, the more we can reasonably charge. If we can get the top, if we can get the numerator to infinity, and if we can get the denominator down to zero, i.e. no time delay, no effort and sacrifice, we can charge as much as we want. Just to really drill home this point, everyone wants to be in good shape, right? That's the dream outcome, to be in good shape. If I can reduce the time delay down to instantaneous and reduce the effort and sacrifice to nothing, i.e., if I can give you a pill, you swallow it, and as soon as you swallow it, you're really fit, in shape instantly, how much would that pill be worth? It would be worth billions. It would be worth so much money, right? If you look at Ozempic is a similar version of that. It's just that the time delay is a lot longer, but the perceived likelihood of achievement for Ozempic, because it's a drug, is really high. That's just in a small example, what the value equation literally in action. As designers, we often focus on the bottom of the equation, which is all about making it easy for the client, but the massive value, the charge 5x, 10x, 100x value, lives in the top left. It lives in understanding that dream outcome. But as I said before, we can only increase the dream outcome if we know exactly what it is. But the trap is that most clients don't actually know how to articulate their dream outcome. So we have these discovery calls and they'll lead us down the yellow brick road of their brand, but it's difficult to understand exactly what it is that makes that client tick. How is it that we get sign off? And it doesn't even necessarily need to be about the brand. You know, the more we understand the individual that we're talking to as well, the more we can realize what their dream outcome is and how they can sell it into various stakeholders. Or they might be the stakeholder of themselves, in which case we get to skip a step. So the prospects might just say, I just need a logo, but that's not good enough. And this is where it leads us to what I think is the most critical skill a designer can possess, which is this interview, which is understanding what's invisible. So to increase our value, as I said, we must understand the prospect better than they understand themselves. We need to move from being a person who takes orders to more of like a therapist. And this happens in this discovery call, this interview process kind of thing. Not about logistics necessarily, it's about understanding the client's psyche. If we take a brief at face value, we position ourselves as a commodity. It's all a race to zero. The client's saying, how can I achieve this brief as cheaply as possible, right? And that was where we become a commodity. And anything that's commoditized is a race directly down to zero. Really quickly, let's talk about the fashion industry. Zara was fast fashion. Okay, I'm not really sure where it sits right now, but Zara founded fast fashion. There are newspaper articles that introduced Zara when Zara first came around, and it said that it was fast fashion. Zara kind of coined the phrase fast fashion. But now Zara is trying to position itself as a luxury item because it simply can't keep up with the likes of Shein and Temu, right? Because Shein and Temu will offer similar, I guess, kind of quality for way cheaper and from the comfort of your own home, and you can just scroll through, right? So that's because fast fashion is a commodity. It's people wanting clothes, not for the quality, not for the inherent value that it possesses, but because they just need it quickly and they need it cheaply. Therefore, we're in a race to the bottom. If you commoditize yourself or if you commoditize anything, it's always a race to the very bottom. Vinted is kind of a commodity based arena, right? Because you can get everything for cheaper than retail price on Vinted. But it does end up being a race to the bottom. Anyone who played FIFA, actually, anyone who played FIFA Ultimate Team would understand this, where in order to get your product to sell quickly, you needed to undercut, in order to get your player to sell quickly, you needed to undercut the existing cheapest buy now price, right? And if there is a lot of supply of that player, then it just keeps getting undercut until it drives right way down to zero. It's a commodity, right? So you need to deliver more value. Instead of having a fodder player, you need to have your Cristiano Ronaldo, your Kylian Mbappe, right? That's a good few examples, but just to illustrate, do not commoditize yourself as a creative because everyone else is commoditizing you. You do not need to do it yourself. It's about delivering value. I actually had a client recently. I won't talk about who the client is, but I walked them through this process. We didn't actually end up working together. So the discovery call itself maybe didn't work, although they were happy to work after the discovery call. It was more about pricing structures that didn't work. It's a community. It was a community that I was delivering this pitch to, and they were trying to develop a digital presence for this community, right? So on the surface, it's just like a logo for a club, essentially, but below the surface, it's more of a cultural movement. It was a community that started on WhatsApp. It scaled. Uh, it scaled on WhatsApp as well. It just started with a bunch of friends. It scaled to like quite large numbers. One of the questions I asked was, what inspired you to start the business? Okay. Because generally we're quite doe-eyed. We're quite in the clouds when we start a business. So it's a good proxy to understand what the prospect's dream outcome would be. And the raw answer was that these guys wanted a third space. But the real underlying part of it, which is where I missed it really, was because as young people living in London, it felt like a lot of things were too expensive. So they wanted a third space to network, to interact, and to get accessible movement, accessible exercise. This tells me that the dream outcome isn't actually a logo. It's not about looking professional. The dream outcome is about safety and accessibility and authenticity and feeling like you have a place to call your own in a city which can sometimes feel like it's rejecting you as a young person, right? Another question I love to ask, how would you describe your brand in 3 nouns? I got this from, sure, look at the book, from Alan Peters in his book, Logos That Last. This is an excellent book. And the reason that it's important to define the brand by nouns is because it's rooted in something real. Everyone can use adjectives, which are kind of like out there, you know, anyone can say, oh, premium or, you know, um, authentic or whatever it might be, whatever the buzzword of the day is. But if you root it in something real, like a tree, then firstly, it's more interesting. We can have a conversation. Oh, why a tree? Why is that important to you? But also, it means that as a designer, we have a point of departure. We have a symbol that we can use as a platform to move forward from. So, the three nouns are a good way to move forward as well. So once we understand that feeling, this is just a couple of questions that I ask. We then have to define the visual enemy. I spoke about this in the last podcast. We can talk about who we are based on what we're absolutely not. Then it's a case of, okay, well, who is it? What celebrity maybe is it that you absolutely wouldn't want wearing your brand or wouldn't want involved in your community, right? So I got to this answer a few different ways with this particular client. I said, are there any brands or logos that you don't like? Are there any that you do like, obviously? And for this prospect, the problem was the soullessness that we find in corporate structures. So they explicitly mentioned that they didn't like branding where all the characters pulled out. So they actually called out Jaguar and Burberry as negative examples because the character of the brand marks, the character of the word marks has been pulled out to be, sans serif and very minimal. So for me, this was gold. So if I just used this and designed a clean kind of Bauhaus or Swiss style logo, which is like fairly trendy, it would have failed. These guys wanted character. These guys wanted it to be inviting for the people in this community. They mentioned liking various things like sports logos and a bit of 3Ds. Like sports logos for me, like indicates tribalism. The whole reason that we have an affinity to a sports logo is because it's a tribal element. They wanted to create their own tribe. They wanted to create their own community. This is where I'm looking at, okay, well, areas that people have defined themselves by a tribe, not only in sport, but, the international Stussy tribe, for example. So they wanted it to be like a crest, like a badge that you wear on your chest. This is the way that I understood it. Guys, if you're listening and you still need a logo, like this is pretty gold. I kind of walked you through this before, but for what it's worth, just as a reminder, if you still need that logo. So now we have a bit more of a vibe, but we also need to increase the likelihood of achievement of these future goals. So to do that, we kind of have to time travel a bit. So a low value designer is someone who designs for where the business is today, whereas a high value designer will design for where the business will be in the future. And the designs will have some staying power. They'll be perennial. There's a really great book by Ryan Holiday called Perennial Seller. And there's also the Lindy kind of heuristic. Is it Lindy or Linda heuristic? And it's just like for every year that something exists on its own, you can expect it to exist for another year. So if something exists for 10 years, you can expect it to exist for another 10 years kind of thing. That's the way I understand it anyway. But anyway, the point is you want it to have staying power. So then the question was, okay, well, what's the dream outcome for your brand in the short term, the next year, 2 years, but also long term, the next few decades? And the raw answer was to grow, have more members. So again, that means that the branding needs to be inviting. Go on trips abroad. So the branding itself also needs to be. This is something which I think is underappreciated when it comes to logo design and coming up with word marks and stuff. The brand needs to be able to be pronounced in different accents and different dialects. And it also needs to not mean something different in another language. So trips abroad kind of articulate this as well. If you're looking at where the trips abroad are, like in Europe or whatever. So, okay, translate the word mark. They already had their name, but if I come up with a word mark that abbreviates that name, for example, does that abbreviation mean something completely different in another country, for example? And we want to avoid that. So again, that gives me a bit more direction. They wanted some partnerships with some high street brands as well. So then it comes down to, okay, well, what would that partnership look like? Can we actually like mock that up, to dream that up? How would that partnership function? What value exchange are you having with this partner? So this is where the dreams become a little bit more real. So the perceived likelihood of achieving these dreams also increases. Okay. The reason that they wanted the partnerships, for example, was to give it a little bit more status, right? Was so that it looked like a peer amongst these high street brands and not just like a fan club of these high street brands, which is great. So then it comes down to, okay, so we want to create a logo that can, and a brand aesthetic that can sit comfortably next to these brands. It can't look amateur. It can't, even though it needs to be inviting and accessible, it also needs to stand on its own and stand in a lockup alongside these well-established brands. So these are just a few ways of how we kind of close this gap. We show the prospects that our design bridges the gap between whatever community group and like the genuine dream outcome. And this is how we justify that fee, by walking them through that journey and convincing them that this journey is doable and that we can be the Yoda, we can be the Gandalf, the Dumbledore to walk them through it, or the 11, maybe. I don't know whether 11 is kind of like a Gandalf. I don't know who it is that in Stranger Things would be the leader. Mike, I guess, according to Will. Who knows? Anyway, that's besides the point. So the key is that the key that I'd say is to stop trying to sell better design, because clients don't really care. The biggest mistakes that creatives make is pricing based on our time rather than on the value that we deliver to the client in the final outcome. So if we want to double our fees, we need to use this value equation. And this is the exact framework that I've used to turn a basic logo into comprehensive brand strategy projects. So again, Hormozi teaches us that the value equals a dream outcome multiplied by the likelihood of achievement divided by time delay multiplied by effort and sacrifice. And the job in this discovery call is to find that dream outcome, to really get into the nitty gritty and understand the prospect psychology. So the design doesn't just become a graphic, it becomes the tool that helps them to achieve whatever their dream is. So this is where, as designers, we can stop taking orders and start auditing these dreams, basically, and start making them real. So after we've gone through this whole process, this whole interview process, we can play back a client's own words to them, interpreted through a strategic lens, and this can help them feel seen. People don't pay for like a solution. They pay when they feel understood. So the key in this call is to make sure that we are understanding the prospect. So in the wrap up of the call, don't just say thank you, reiterate your understanding. Say, I understand that you want to move away from this and move towards that. So by doing this, again, we increase the perceived likelihood of achieving things. So, the whole thing, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Next time we're on a call, talk like 20% of the time and listen 80%. Just direct the conversation, almost as if it's a podcast episode. The whole point is to get them to yap as much as you can and take copious notes about everything that they're yapping about. Ask the questions that reveal the dream outcome, and then you can package that dream outcome in a way that's real by design back to them to increase the likelihood that they're going to commission you, but also to increase the amount of value that you can reasonably charge for this prospect to do the work for the prospect. And that is value. That's creating more value. That's understanding your prospects better than they understand themselves. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy it, please share it with someone, and please make sure that you have liked and subscribed and followed and whatever platform it is that you're using. Once again, closing out 2025, the support's been really good launching this podcast, so really appreciate it. And if you have any comments or anything that you would like to hear going into 2026, I am all ears. I have people in my DMs a fair amount asking different questions and asking about different opportunities. I'd love to address them on the podcast as well, because if it helps one person, I'm sure it will help multiple. So please do ask ask away, ask questions. And yeah, without any further ado, I will see you on the next one. Have a great day.